Three.
Hello, everyone. I'm here with Felipe Lantero today, and we're going to be reviewing sessions 15 and 16 of the Disruptive Leadership course.
Yep.
Felipe, first tell me, what have you learned today?
Yeah, so today we talked about mainly the position of the judge and what it involves in being a disruptive leader, no? So we talked about mainly four ideas, which is challenging assumptions and rules, managing your own beliefs, establishing the right criteria, and following the rules. So let's start with challenging the rules. Challenging assumptions. It's all about seeing the world from a different perspective. We all have different ways of thinking and of seeing the world from our own perspective. So this was clearly seen in class with the picture of the young and the old lady in one picture. That some people, according to what you saw, you were using one side of the brain, and if not, you were using the other. It was really interesting to see how the mates I have in class saw the old one, and I couldn't see it until they pointed it out. And I think that's really important, and it can go to the extent of challenging the rules. No, so if there's a rule that doesn't make sense to me, it's not all about challenging, but pointing it out and making sure that I have a point that it's valid, and then going on to challenge it from a respected position. So I think that was really, really important and a really key message on also being a disruptive leader and how you can transform that. Maybe you sometimes you have to challenge your own rules, which is what Danielle said in class. So as I said, we have different interpretations of everything. So don't be scared to put out what you think or believe. And we also have sometimes a mental lock of following the rules without even looking at them now. So we have to do this because it's the rules or because we do have to do it. And sometimes we don't even stop and think, hey, why am I doing this? Which is, I think, really valuable. And by doing that process, you also learn a lot of things. And I think that's really important when you're following rules from a disruptive leader or a non-disruptive leader. And also when you're a disruptive leader and when you're making the rules, I would even say that it's even more important as you have a lot of followers. But you also have to, it's what another big point, not being foolish. So, of course, it's very nice and fun to challenge some rules and have different perspectives, but to a certain extent. So you can't just be foolish and for example, when you go to Rome, which is something that an example that we talked in class, when you go to Rome, you have to follow Rome's rules. You can't just go like, oh, hey, I'm gonna do what we do in the USA because it's a totally different culture and totally ways of doing things. And that goes for being a disruptive leader. So if you're an American and go to Italy to make business, you have to respect the Italian tradition and not go beyond the spectrum too much. So yeah, I think that's also a really valuable lesson from today, respecting the rules. Um, and also we talked about establishing the right criteria. So yeah,
Yeah, you mentioned like the famous saying, "When in Rome, do as the Romans do,"
yeah.
um, and how to adhere to the rules, obviously. And in this subject, we've been taught to challenge the assumptions on the rules, like it said, and look at the perspectives,
Mhm.
yet also to follow to an extent. Do you think there is a balance between both of those? Do you think in some scenarios more, in some scenarios less?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it totally depends on the situations. And sometimes you got to trust your gut and go with what you think and believe. If you think that's right or you think that's gonna have the best outcome, go for it. And but again, as you said, have a balance between, oh, I can't go to Thailand and sell or be vaping because that's against their culture and their beliefs. So again, you have to respect that, I think.
Exactly. Respect is a big part of it. Now, I'd like you to take it back in the direction of what you were mentioning, perspective with the exercises we did in class, etc. How do you or reflect on how you see the world differently, or how you can see it differently
Yeah.
with this
Yeah,
perspective.
it's actually something that we discussed in the when we had to do the artist and in the class where we discussed that role. And I think it's super important to see the world differently, and we have to accept that we are not robots and we see things differently. So and it's important also to follow that instinct of doing things differently. A disruptive leader is also someone that does things completely different. That's one of the things of being disruptive, and it's not about just seeing the world differently, but following that feeling and following that thought. So I think to be disruptive, you definitely have to be see the world differently and follow that.
Makes sense. I agree completely. Um, how do you think the mental block that we experience when trying to adhere to the rules is relevant to this and to the previous concepts you've explored?
Yeah, I said this before, but this mental block of following the rules is like very obvious because sometimes we don't even question what we're doing. We're just following the rules because they are the rules, you know? And I think it's really important to sometimes step aside and look at it from a different angle, you know? And think, hey, why am I doing this? Could I do this better? So that's part of being a disruptive leader, finding innovative ways and looking at it from different perspectives. And It's a process of continuous improvement, which is I think it's key to being a disruptive leader and for innovation, and it's key to have that point of the judge, you know, of seeing, hey, maybe this rule should be changed or we shouldn't follow this rule as much. So I think it's super important to not have that mental lock of following the rules 100%. The rules are good, but they have to make sense and they have to adapt to different situations.
Makes sense. Now, I'm going to ask you to think back to class, to the sacred cow exercise. Essentially,
Yeah.
give me a rule you might think is treated as sacred, and or in your experience, how you've seen it,
Yeah,
how you've dealt with it.
yeah, then Danielle said you can find anything about your regular life and put an example. So my personal thing is something that I'm very frustrated with, which is uh, some about the parking in Madrid. So there's a certain part of Madrid which is called Almendra, which is exactly the middle. Which, if you're not a resident or have a totally electrical vehicle, you can't park there. And the objective of that is to promote electric cars and to stop carbon emissions. But it doesn't make sense that it's separated by a thin line. And just by going 500 meters to the right, you can't park and 500 meters to the left you can't. So for me that's a rule that makes no sense, and I think if you're going to do it correctly and go all the way, so maybe make the whole of Madrid, and that way I think it's much more effective, much more restrictive, and the objective is fulfilled much better. So I mean that's something that applies to me, that I suffer a lot, so that's my sacred cow that I can't. And it's a bit challenging to challenge this because you're up against the quite a big one, the government of Spain, and yeah, so we'll see how that turns out.
All right, so we have mentioned rules, how to look at them, and ideas and which context in which to use them. Correct?
Yeah,
So in this part, how do you evaluate an idea or a rule? What criteria do you use to do such?
yeah. Well, to evaluate an idea, I think it's super important. Something I said earlier, that to have different perspectives, and what better way to have multiple people judging that, so so that you don't have just one vote. And I think that's the main thing. And having a diverse group of people that might affect some areas. So maybe not have nine lawyers, for example, judging something, but maybe have an artist, a lawyer, a workman. So this is an example, of course, but maybe find a team of people that are specialized in each area to to evaluate an idea. So I think that's really important. Just the perspective is it's key to evaluate properly.
Makes sense. Makes sense completely. Now, we covered another concept, which was the judge's toolbox in class. What would be potentially your favorite tools or ones you've used before from the toolbox?
Yeah. I think I have two clear favorites, to be honest. And one of them is a SWOT analysis. I think it's super good. Something that we were taught at the beginning of the university, and personally, I've used it a lot, and I think it's absolutely great. Um, and it's very complete, and it performs its duty perfectly. So I think that's a really good one. And also the one we learned in class, which I think I kind of applied it before, but not all the way, is the defend and attack idea. So it's where you put yourself in a position where you defend that idea, but also attack it. So you know its key points and its strong points. And I think that's also very valuable when you attack it all the way or you defend it all the way. You really find out what's the thing that it lacks or what's the thing that it's strongest. So those two are definitely my two favorites from the artist toolbox.
Makes sense. Thank you very much. Um, I believe this is the end of the interview. Do you have any other points that you would like to comment on? Any other experiences?
I think that's good for today's session. Thank
All right, then it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you for your time.
you very much. Bye bye.